upon. Yes, you're right. She is the person of Ogogo Effiong. Ogogo Effiong was the 2023-2024 Africa Regional Director of the Society of Petroleum Engineers. On to the next question. Who is the current SP Ghana president? Who is the current SP Ghana president? Who is the current SP Ghana president? Right. Jude Onity is right. The current SP Ghana president is Engineer Derek Kluche. Engineer Derek Kluche is the current SP Ghana president. Next question. Mention any SP students chapter that you know. Mention any SP student chapter that you know. Mention any SP student chapter that you know. Yes, Montel Abraham is saying SP KNUST. Enoch is saying SP UNEL. Yes, you are both right. You are both right. We have SP KNUST, as you said, UNEL, UMAT, Takoradi Technical University, Kumasi Technical University, and then many others. Right. Thank you very much for your participation. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take you through the flow of events for today. The first is the welcome address and introduction, which I just did. The second is an opening address from the president of the Society of Petroleum Engineers, SPE, Ghana section, after which our speaker for today will be introduced. And then the speaker will move on to present. The floor will be open for questions and answers. In the course of today's webinar, a link will be sent into the chat. Please do well to fill the form and let us know how we can make future sessions better. Then we'll end the session with a vote of thanks. Right. Without much ado, I would like to invite the president for the Society of Petroleum Engineers, SP Ghana section, who is the person of Engineer Derek Kluche. So Engineer Derek, if you are here, over to you. Thank you. Engineer Derek Kluche, please, are you here with us? All right. So, our president, that is the president for the Society of Petroleum Engineers, would give us the opening address, after which our speaker for today would be introduced. Then the speaker would move on to give us her presentation. Then the floor will be open for questions and answers. And please pay attention. In the course of today's webinar, a link will be sent into the chat box, to the chat. Please do well to fill the form and let us know how we can make future sessions better. And so I would like to invite the president for the Society of Petroleum Engineers, SP Ghana section, who is the person of Engineer Derek Kluche. Engineer Derek, please, if you're here with us, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Afternoon, everyone. How are we all doing this afternoon? I'm happy to have you guys all on board, even as we talk on this topic of sustainability. It's important to us. Even though our work, sometimes we get that notion that we destroy the environment. It's actually not true. We actually help the environment, and it's good that we understand the impact of some of the things we do and some of the areas that affects our work as well. So we are happy to have a very seasoned speaker with us today. We hope that this one would be one of the good sessions for us. I'm actually very interested in it. So I'm looking forward to hearing what will be shared. And then please, let's pay attention and ask questions. There's the room. This is the time for knowledge sharing. So don't be shy to ask the questions. Don't be shy to chip in. We're all here to learn. This is one and more of other series of topics that will be covered in this period, and we are doing it for us. So let's enjoy this period. Thank you all for taking time out of your lunch. I know some people are at lunch. I had to quickly go do my lunch and come back because I was really excited about this. And then I'm happy that we all are on board to come and listen to our seasoned speaker today. So I'll hand over to your team. Let's have a good one. And then thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much, Engineer Derek Luce, for the address. And so, without much ado, I would like to move on to introduce our speaker. So, our speaker, Owosa, is a lawyer with experience in policy. She's a lawyer with experience in policy, knowledge management, and strategy across energy and sustainability tasks and sustainability markets. She has worked with government-led missions, donor-funded programs, private companies across Africa and Europe. Owosa is a co-author on the acclaimed Touching Hydrogen Future book, published at the World Hydrogen Leaders Congress in Rotterdam in 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, before I move on with introducing the speaker, I would like us to know the benefits of joining the Society of Petroleum Engineers, SPE. And so I'll move on ahead to play the video. Please stay with us and let us know the benefits of joining the Society of Petroleum Engineers. Thank you.
If you're a student, you need to be an SPE member. If you're a new professional, you need to be an SPE member. If you're a seasoned professional, you need to be an SPE member. Everybody needs to be an SPE member because SPE is the largest organization of petroleum engineers. And there's something in it for everyone. Whether it's networking, jobs, information, or knowledge, you need to be an SPE member.
So I first joined SPE, I want to say in like 2011. I was just beginning my kind of oil and gas career. I started out as an engineering tech for Occidental Petroleum, and it was kind of the go-to social or professional network for oil and gas professionals. It's kind of carried with me since. SPE is unique, I think, in that it joins professional internationally. Like the oil and gas business is international, and therefore your network, it should also be international. It's a really great kind of one-stop shop for your technical knowledge, as well as furthering yourself as a professional, particularly as a young woman in the oil and gas industry.
If you're a student, you need to be an SPE member. If you're a new professional, you need to be an SPE member. If you're a seasoned professional, you need to be an SPE member. Everybody needs to be an SPE member because SPE is the largest organization of petroleum engineers. And there's something in it for everyone. Whether it's networking, jobs, information, or knowledge, you need to be an SPE member.
So I first joined SP, I want to say in like 2011. I was just beginning my kind of oil and gas career. I started out as an engineering tech for Occidental Petroleum, and it was kind of the go-to social or professional network for oil and gas professionals. It's kind of carried with me since. SPE is unique, I think, in that it joins professional internationally. Like the oil and gas business is international, and therefore your network, it should also be international. It's a really great kind of one-stop shop for your technical knowledge, as well as furthering yourself as a professional, particularly as a young woman in the oil and gas industry.
If you're a student, you need to be an SPE member. If you're a new professional, you need to be an SPE member. If you're a seasoned professional, you need to be an SPE member. Everybody needs to be an SPE member because SPE is the largest organization of petroleum engineers. And there's something in it for everyone. Whether it's networking, jobs, information, or knowledge, you need to be an SPE member.
So I first joined SP, I want to say in like 2011. I was just beginning my kind of oil and gas career. I started out as an engineering tech for Occidental Petroleum, and it was kind of the go-to social or professional network for oil and gas professionals. It's kind of carried with me since. SPE is unique, I think, in that it joins professional internationally. Like the oil and gas business is international, and therefore your network, it should also be international. It's a really great kind of one-stop shop for your technical knowledge, as well as furthering yourself as a professional, particularly as a young woman in the oil and gas industry.
If you're a student, you need to be an SPE member. If you're a new professional, you need to be an SPE member. If you're a seasoned professional, you need to be an SPE member. Everybody needs to be an SPE member because SPE is the largest organization of petroleum engineers. And there's something in it for everyone. Whether it's networking, jobs, information, or knowledge, you need to be an SPE member.
So I first joined SP, I want to say in like 2011. I was just beginning my kind of oil and gas career. I started out as an engineering tech for Occidental Petroleum, and it was kind of the go-to social or professional network for oil and gas professionals. It's kind of carried with me since. SPE is unique, I think, in that it joins professional internationally. Like the oil and gas business is international, and therefore your network, it should also be international. It's a really great kind of one-stop shop for your technical knowledge, as well as furthering yourself as a professional, particularly as a young woman in the oil and gas industry.
If you're a student, you need to be an SPE member. If you're a new professional, you need to be an SPE member. If you're a seasoned professional,
Right. Thank you all for watching the video. And so for those who are not yet members of the Society of Petroleum Engineers, please reach out to the various student chapters in your institutions, and the executives will help you on how to register and then become a member of the Society of Petroleum Engineers. And so thank you all for watching the video and then deciding to become members of the Society of Petroleum Engineers. All right. I would like to move on with the introduction of the speaker. And so Owosa is a lawyer with experience in policy, knowledge management, and strategy across energy and sustainability markets. She has worked with government-led missions, donor-funded programs, private companies across Africa and Europe. Owosa is a co-author on the acclaimed Touching Hydrogen Future book, published at the World Hydrogen Leaders Congress in Rotterdam in 2022. She also has published several works and journals, including Power in Nigeria, the Decade of Gas in 2022. She went on to publish Natural Gas and Energy Transition, Implications for the Nigeria Energy Industry, also in 2022. Then Lighting Africa's Path to Sustainable Energy Transition, the Role of Green Bonds in 2023, and co-author on the recently published Energy Regulation in Africa, which was published on the reputable Springer Journal. Previously, Owosa was an advisor on the GIZ Global Hydrogen Diplomacy Program and a hydrogen policy expert for the Research Institute for Sustainability. She currently is a policy officer with the Long Duration Energy Storage Council and was recently honored as one of Africa's 35 heroes driving environmental change. Ladies and gentlemen, your speaker, Lawyer Owosa Ehaun. Lawyer Owosa, your audience are ready. Thank you.
Hello, Emmanuel. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please, we can.
Awesome. Oh, thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be joining you all today. I will, just start by saying I've been a member of the SPE Society proxy. I'm not an engineer, but my parents were, and I've been able to contribute seamlessly to the community, both in Nigeria, in the UK and abound. So really nice to be connecting with my Ghanaian family. Actually spent some weeks in Accra last year, so happy to be coming back virtually this time. Right. So Emmanuel, would you want me to start my slides now, or would you me to answer some questions first? Yeah.
You can go ahead.
Let me see. Okay, so it says I can't share my slide, unfortunately. Let's just try again. Sorry, I couldn't come up earlier.
Please give us a minute.
Yes, apologies.
Yeah, we're working on it.
So we're good here.
Right.
Just put this out here. Right, everyone. I just put together a quick slides just to maybe make the conversation, make this session a bit conversational, if that's okay. You may have a bit interactive as well. I think it's been a very long few weeks in January 2025, and this is the start of a lot of people's first careers. A lot of people are meeting their 5 mark in their career. A lot of people have been in the sector for a few years, but I think as students, Emmanuel, I don't know what the group of students we have in the room today. If you're graduates or fresh students, it'd be good to have an idea.
We currently have graduates and then students joining us today, and some young professionals as well.
Okay, awesome. A really good mix. Well, if for any guarantee to all of you, I've been a first-year student, I've been a graduate, and I've been a young professional. So you're in very good company because I've been through all those stages. So today we're just going to be speaking more about sustainability criteria in the energy sector. And then I'll just briefly kind of have an introduction to share more about my career pathway. And then we can also discuss about if anyone has any questions to how I've managed to navigate the industry. For just a little starter, I just thought I'll have a little more background to the work that I've done and the work that I'm currently doing. So I was born in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. For people who don't know, that is the premise center for oil and gas in the entire continent. If you've not heard of the Niger Delta region, I don't know. But I was born in the middle of the Niger Delta region. stages they really from in attractive in area that's going through commercial success is very important for me. What I will also makes my story different. Hello?
Yes, you can be
Oh,
heard. Can
did
you
my
please reshare your presentation?
yeah, it's back up now. Can you see it?
Yeah, it can be seen.
Great. For many of you who don't know, I think the Emmanuel's introduction was great. I started my career in oil and gas law. So I started looking into oil and gas regulations, oil and gas procurements. I then started working with the gas markets out in West Africa. So there was just that natural introduction to the industry. Following on from that, I have worked on some energy transition projects, both in West Africa, especially in Nigeria, and actually Sierra Leone as well. Published a whole lot of material and books. All the links are on my LinkedIn, or I have a website as well that you could please check out. Been on a bunch of podcasts. So literally all of this, by the way, has happened in a span of 6 years. Just to make all of you in the room feel a bit more comfortable. I don't have years of experience. I graduated from my first degree in 2006. I did my master's in 2018. Yeah, basically we're barely under the 10-year mark, and I'm just trying to remind the young professionals in the room that don't be scared. There's time to do as much as possible. And this is all I've been able to do in this amount of time. So now that we have all the access in the world, anything is possible. So that's enough about me. Please feel free to ask questions at the end if they come fit. Right, so let's get into the conversation of sustainability. Oh, this is such a buzzword. For every single time I hear sustainability nowadays, I feel I just need another bag of like CDs or something. Give me my cash, right? But sustainability is becoming such a buzzword, and it's only fair that that's what's happening, because sustainability, to how we define it, is the capacity to meet the needs of our present without compromising the ability for future generations to meet their need. This has echoed in the oil and gas industry for years. So when we even think about when they say extractive industries, it's the sense that people feel, oh, oil and gas is going to run out, oil and gas is going to finish. The thing about the fossil industry is that a lot of that has been embedded in the way our activities happen over decades previously. Now that people are worried that the extractive industry is drying out in a sense, how are we making sure our extractive industries are being sustainable? This is such a big conversation, despite the entire outlook into looking towards low carbon energy. The truth's being told, and World Bank and the likes have actually said it, we actually need a sufficient amount of the natural resources industry to operate for us to actually meet our low carbon future. The reason being is that even just look at the transmission sector now, and I mean from taking renewable energy from one house to another, you need a lot of cables. And if anybody knows this for sure, cables, the magnetors, connectors, all of those have a lot of plastics. Where do we get plastics from? Crude, renewables, right? So there's a whole 360. However, now looking we need to find ways that we can make it, right? But at the same time, I want to make sure people in the industry are not suffering. I mean, such a crucial part in the energy or the oil and gas industry, despite it being very, very much frowned upon. I then also wanted to introduce us to this idea of sustainability transition. This was a very famous graphic that was put together by Swedish professor Jan2025, and he's basically saying that for a very long time, we've looked at sustainability as only carbon emissions. So to the activity, those were like oil to a new site to do a survey of a ground, anything, for example, where there is a massive project for I think it's an oil and gas. I don't remember the figure or how big it is. But one of the things that actually happened in the A&A assessment that actually hasn't happened in a long time is there was an air quality check that was carried out in Mozambique to make sure that the amount of crude that was going to be collected from that, well, the extractive activity that was happening in that environment did not affect the quality of air in that region. That's new. And that's what we're going to start seeing over the next few years of more countries or more companies paying attention to their sustainability mix, not just for the profits, but for the planet and the people. Another concept that okay. Another concept that I also like to introduce, speaking of sustainability, is the SDGs. If anybody doesn't know this by now, they're called the Sustainable Development Goals. These are made up of 17 different goals, but 169 different targets. So within the 17 goals, you have 169 different targets that make these goals. The first being prosperity. You see the previous slide, I talk about profits. So that's more looking into the economy. And they've blocked out these particular goals like decent work, industry and innovation. Let me see if I can show you here. So the first line is looking at goal number 7, for example, is different quality work. Goal number 9, industrialization. Goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. When we look at responsible production and consumption, we mean things like avoiding oil spill, avoiding cross-contamination, and then we look at things like reduce inequalities. So I'll speak briefly again about CSR, which is corporate social responsibility, in a bit. The next being people. So like, how are projects now actually looking at the society, like people? Like, how is your project actually being like, okay, hold on, this is something that is going to make us profit, but how are we considering people as well, right? So you have these goals listed here too. And in the planet, so looking at the environment, the biosphere, like I mentioned, air pollution, how is our project now going to play a role in the quality of water? How is our project going to play a role in biodiversity? How is our project going to play a role in air pollution? Like, these are things that now more companies are looking out for, and people are beginning to gain additional skills or upskilling to meet this demand in a few years or even in this year to come. Another thing I wanted to introduce us to was the concept of ESG frameworks. So I don't know how many people have heard of ESG frameworks, but essentially what they are is environmental, social, and government frameworks for sustainability criteria. You remember I mentioned an environmental impact assessment. That is a baseline assessment that any project at any scale has to take to make sure that they're meeting environmental statistics that actually match the demand for the country, state, or region that you're operating in. Some countries, like Nigeria, for example, have a very strict environmental assessment, impact assessment criteria. So it means that for any project of this kind of magnitude, you have to get an EIA certificate from the government or the relevant bodies. I don't know what it's like in Ghana, but I'm sure somebody can tell me in a bit during the Q&A session. So Emmanuel, I would like to ask somebody about that question later. But essentially what this ESG looks into is kind of similar to the SDG criteria, but ESG criteria actually stand to help you get financial gain, truly. So when we actually start looking at things of water use and conservation, for example, which is an environmental metrics, there's some companies that actually give their individual divisions, hey, if you guys can reduce the amount of water wastage that happens here, we can take that money and put into something else. So those ESG criteria allow for investment incentives that naturally have to happen. And then I think we would just move on to, I think I have one on, So where does CSR fit into ESG and sustainability assessment? So remember, we've spoken about ESG, which is more of an investment side or financial criteria, and then the SDGs, which is more looking at the social economic sorry, are being immemorial. We've been with a lot of companies do things like projects, trying to help their local areas, to help For some reason, Zoom keeps tripping me off. I'm not sure why, Emmanuel. Is that on my end? You're muted. Okay, well, I'll just carry on. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, I hope that doesn't happen again. Okay, so just briefly moving on. And would you let me know if there's a question?
Okay, sure.
That's any. Okay. Oh. Okay. Disclosures and standards. So because I mentioned that they were mainly looking to kind of find responsibility, anything that means that they have somebody who's
Right. So we've lost our speaker again. It appears her network is unstable. So
I'm so sorry. I rarely use Zoom, but I don't think it's supposed to be this terrible. Or I don't know what's tripping it off. So I'll just
yes.
happen
Lawyer
again.
Wosa, please can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, please, it appears your network is quite unstable. And so that is what is causing the
Yeah, okay. I've just changed it. So I hope this is better now. Okay, I've just changed to another one. Let's see. Okay, I'm just gonna carry on. Sorry about that, everyone. Apologies. Right, so we've just been kind of looking at the initial so ESG sustainability disclosures. So here are a few that some companies are already accorded to. One popular one in Africa at the moment is the one on the bottom, this International Sustainability Standards Board. They're more reflective in activities in Africa. So as you can imagine, when you have to look into disclosures, it has to be something that has to actually exists as a regulatory in countries. And the EU is really booming out with a lot of sustainability reporting disclosures. Like London has one, Switzerland is really good for their disclosures as well. In Africa, the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, has really done a lot of activities in trying to make sure there's stronger compliance for sustainability in Africa. So that's a really good one to check out if you're interested in ESG. Right. So how does sustainability practices actually present in the energy value chain, right? So we've spoken about sustainability as a whole. We've spoken about these SDGs. We've spoken about the we've spoken about the CSRs, and we've also spoken about ESG. So now looking at sustainability as a whole with all these criteria, how do the different practices present values across the value chain? So just to throw some examples out in the hydrogen sector, which is the sector that I most recently used to work in, looking into sustainability, we start to look at things like the project specification, right? So how have particular projects tried to make sure there are less contaminants that enter the hydrogen value chain? That's an aspect of sustainability because it means you're paying attention to the value of water, the different toxins, the different quality of hydrogen that's being produced. Another is additional utilities. So when we talk about additional utilities, we talk about water, for example. In the hydrogen production circle, I'm using hydrogen because that's the most comfortable one I'm more familiar with at this moment. We have to look into the quality of water. In green hydrogen production, you need a lot of pure water, and that process requires desalination, which is basically like the converting of sea salt water into pure water, right? And the process of desalination requires a lot of electricity as well. So how are we making sure those processes are as low carbon as possible so you not to reduce our cost? Same as electricity. What kind of quality of electricity are we using to generate hydrogen and so on? So we're seeing these things appear in the sector, and I'm sure even saving the best for last is the production facility. Now, these production facilities occur in oil and gas sectors alike, or energy industries alike. We look into things as like the operation standards. So what kind of standards are value chains actually introducing into their production of crude, for example, like when you get crude and you actually have to take it downstream, how are you making sure that these operation value chains are as sustainable as possible? Like, are you having too much backlog? Are you paying too much for transportation? Are you having too much cost on overhead for transportation? So while all these things have to happen across the value chain, how are we making sure that we're cutting down pollution, biodiversity losses, and the likes, anything you can imagine at this point. Right. So one approach that I wanted to introduce to the conversation today is this idea of sustainability by design. It's something that our industry has for a very long time ignored. It's also something that a lot of new emerging markets are now trying to introduce. So we see people have like sustainability houses, some sustainable houses, sustainable infrastructure, but it's possible to have a sustainable energy ecosystem too. And these approach, sustainable by design, is basically an approach where at every single step of production, we are thinking about ways to make that step more sustainable. So we even look at the extractive space, for example. Are we doing things that are more environmentally friendly? When you go into a community, for example, are you trying to make sure they're socially alert to what's happening? Are you also making sure that the economic stability for your staff and your workers are actually something that they are called towards too as well? So that's a new conversation. Another thing I wanted to touch on was at what stage developers should consider sustainability. Sorry, this just went a step further. So again, I'm using hydrogen as an example here because this is probably the most recent topic that I've worked on. But again, try to think about it as your normal day-to-day conversation, depending on what field or what value, what sector, what side of the oil and gas supply chain you're operating on, if you're operating on that at all. So do we start looking at sustainability at a feasibility study stage where before the project goes live, we start looking at all the different things that can happen when we look into the ESG criteria or looking into the kind of ESG or sustainable development goals that should be attached to this project? Or are we looking more into the front-end engineering design? Are we training our engineers to understand sustainability practices? Are we training more engineers to understand how to make sure that their water usage and air qualities are ways that meet sustainability criteria? Is this happening in the procurement? Are we procuring goods and services from, eco-friendly, for example, project providers? Are we checking the critical minerals that are involved in the production of our procurement, when it comes to even batteries or copper wires? Are we making sure that these are people who are according to human rights standards? Are we making sure there's no human rights violations that happen at these stages? Even when you look into commissioning, like the projects that we're commissioning these to, doing due diligence to making sure that these companies are actually like good standing in the social environments. Like, are these people who have had issues with the government before? Have they had issues with their local community? Those kind of things. Is this at this point we should be looking at sustainability? Or are you looking at sustainability kind of when the project already exists and everything's looking all shine and great, looking more at the operational readiness stage? And the next is, do we start looking at sustainability at the final investment decision? Now, obviously, this is not chronological order at all. I'm just trying to mix and match. All of these are correct. The thing with sustainability is you cannot be sustainable at only one aspect of the value chain, because your carbon footprint, for example, if that's something that an energy company wants to take into consideration, they have to make sure that sustainability is echoed across various parts of the value chain. The reason being that to have a business that outlives you, you need to make sure that the business can stand on its own in a way that's sustainable. If, for example, we have an issue where a new mine is being developed in somewhere, Kazakhstan or somewhere, like a country, right? And the managers or the manufacturers or the developers are not paying attention to the kind of human rights violations that happen in that region. Once you start that project, you can't go back and be like, oh, wait, we've been here for 10 years and now we need to go back to the beginning and make sure things are up to scratch. So it's important that we pay attention to sustainability, not just as an idea, but in the way we actually deliver our projects as well. I think I just briefly here wanted to talk about hydrogen, but I don't know how much time we have, but we can always come back to this. I'm in love with the hydrogen conversation right now. I see a lot of value in the work that's happening there. I think just briefly before I move on into the career chat, I wanted to maybe say that these I'm sure everybody's heard of hydrogen, but I thought I'd bring out the colors again and really just introduce the different metrics we have for green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, turquoise, and green. The primary goal is to make sure that we're at a point where we're only looking at blue and green hydrogen. Green hydrogen, using SMRs and also using carbon capture, and green hydrogen in the sense that the hydrogen is literally from low carbon or renewables, right? There's also this, it's called a hydrogen ladder, which kind of looks at the core usage for hydrogen. And at the moment, West African countries are at the stage A, which is looking into fertilization, hydrogeneration, methanol production, as well as desulfurization processes. So I know Ghana, for example, has introduced interest into like methanol production, I believe. So super interesting if that's an angle you want to go down on. And then just briefly, like a snapshot of where hydrogen projects are. Globally, as you can see in West Africa and Nigeria, Togo and Nigeria, we don't have much activity as of 2023. I think that's when this is from. But again, there is a lot of perspective across the world. So just because your location isn't ready for hydrogen doesn't mean you can't chip into the work that's happening in the South Pacific region or in Europe or in South America. Okay, so I'll just skip through this slide. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about Korea. If I don't have questions about the technical stuff, I would like to just jump straight into this, if Emmanuel, if that's okay.
Lawyer Osa, please, you can move on with your presentation. Right after you are done, the floor will be open for questions and answers. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I've spoken a lot about sustainability in the energy sector. I try to make it as wholesome as possible, but I do run 2 courses on sustainability in the energy sector, one with the World Hydrogen Leaders and one with Energy Connect. I think these are all on my LinkedIn page, but I can share links with you all as well if you want to get into more depth on sustainability in the sector. I also kind of work with some industry leaders to help them understand the role that sustainability can play, not only in their value chains, but helping the staff understand their sustainability ideas and exposing them to those the languages as well. So going back to Korea, one of my very good, I think this is an African saying actually, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's one of those things that people identify as kind of teamwork. And I guess that's what our careers are like, right? You really can't build a career on the basis of me. Unfortunately, if somebody has to hire you, somebody has to give you a first job, somebody has to interview you, somebody has to refer you. It's not a one-man situation. And because of that reason, it's important, so important for you to build career community. And that's one thing I love about SPE, because right from the onset of your career, you're literally thrown into this network of young career people, experienced career people, retirees, experts. Like the network is so big that I really just feel like it's one of those places as an engineer you should find yourself in. Once you register for university, get into SPE if you want to expose yourself to that network. Another thing, these are just examples of the career networks that I've been part of. So I'm a board of director on the Women in Green Hydrogen mentorship program, as well as mentee. I also work with the Green Careers Hub to help people understand how they can achieve more career success down the energy sector line as well. One thing I wanted to prompt up was helping not just young people, because I've been having this conversation with more experienced people as well. Who do you need more, a mentor or a sponsor? That's another question we'll come back to. Because a mentor is someone who provides your general guidance to navigating your career choices and decision. Meanwhile, a sponsor can be somebody in your industry that actually has an influence to help you obtain visibility in assignments, jobs, or promotion. Now, again, this sponsor doesn't have to be in your company, but the person could be in your sector that they can just refer you to somebody along the lines. I thought I would bring up this distinction. The reason being that a lot of people feel that, I think the next slide I have is actually, yeah, okay, there we go. A lot of people feel that when you look into having a mentor, this mentor is supposed to give you job, read your CV, offer you connections, help you interview. No. A mentor gives you guidance. The one thing that I also feel, even just making myself available to mentor young people, especially Africans, is when you approach somebody for the first time, it's like, hey, my name is Emmanuel. This is what I do. Please, can you help me find a job? If the mentor doesn't even know what your career aspirations is, how good you are in the work you do, they can't help you find a job, but they can guide you, because you can have a one-on-one and say, hey, my name is Emmanuel. This is what I studied. Here's what I like to do. This is what I'm thinking of doing. And they can give you that different perspective. So you need to understand that's what a mentor is for. A sponsor, on the other hand, will be if Emmanuel and I work on the same team for the last 2 years, and he's like, Owosa, I'm trying to get to this position. Okay, I'll bear that in mind. So by the time I'm in my closed meeting rooms and you're like, oh, who should we promote? Emmanuel and I have had a conversation in the coffee room or during lunchtime. On this conversation, I said, oh, actually, we can actually recommend Emmanuel. That person is not a sponsor of me. I don't care about what you studied, where you want to go. I just know in this very moment, you're thinking of getting promoted. And that's now my priority because you've indicated an interest to me as a sponsor to say, hey, I like this person enough to want to push them forward. That's a big indicator that I'm spending this entire year trying to give to, especially young professionals, because we need to stop approaching mentorship as an opportunity opener, but actually building more sponsorships towards helping you get to where you want to get to. Mentors provide guardians, not rules. The next slide I also want to talk about was like mentoring and being a mentor and being a mentee. So we've spoken about mentor. So mentor can help you invest in your network, become an effective mentor, all those things you need to do, right? You need to create impact. Being a mentee is possible regardless of what age of your career you're at. That's another thing I wanted to say. I have mentees that are older than me, that have been in a different sector for 700 years, and they're trying to move into the oil and gas sector. And they're like, hey, Wosa, you've been doing this thing for a long time. How can you help me navigate where I want to go? Amazing. These are people that have children, have a whole life, right? One thing as a mentor I can then give that mentee is, hey, because I've done this, I'm able to guide you into doing that. That's what I want to introduce. So I wanted people to actually know that you being a mentee and being a mentor is something you can do at the same time, because there's a cross-generational or cross-activity thing that can actually happen. So I thought I'll bring that up because I've been finding this concept very interesting over the last few weeks. I think I had something here. No? Okay. I supposed to have something here, so I didn't know where I went to. But another thing I wanted to actually touch on is how to actually position yourself for success. There was supposed to be a note here, but it disappeared. Positioning yourself for success, it means that you need to know the kind of career you want to have. So before you even approach a mentor or a sponsor, I'll give myself as an example. I studied law. I went to Nigerian law school. I got to the bar here, and then I realized I didn't want to practice, your normal charge and pay, we call it, lawyer, being a charge and pay legal professional here. I took the challenge up to myself to actually learn about the sector. I think that's why I got it here. Yeah, there we go. This is what I actually want. To actually learn about the sector. So I spent time reading about the energy, because I had a background in oil and gas anyway. I just need to apply myself. So I started learning about how I could actually apply myself into the sector, despite having a general law degree, right? Which I did. So that's how you position yourself for success. Another way is you have to see yourself as a product. You need to see, if someone goes to the shop and is like, oh, the pen has 700 features. You can do this, you can do this is how much the pen costs. You need to see yourself as a product right from the beginning of your career, because then when you see yourself as a product, you want to make sure your value is increasing. The same bread you've been eating as a child, I'm sure they've changed the amount of milk, they've made it richer, they've tried to keep up with the market, right? So you have to see yourself as a product. And for you to do that, you have to make sure your value is always increasing. Like, since you shouldn't be feeling the same way knowledge-wise since when you graduated, if you graduated last year. You shouldn't be saying the same way knowledge-wise since when you started your new role last year to this year. You need to make sure that you're constantly upskilling yourself in order to position for success. Another thing that I found that has helped me is to discover the missing gap in your line of work. When I first joined the industry, nobody was talking about sustainability and energy. It was like sustainability was here, energy was here. Nobody wanted to have that conversation. And then I realized there was a gap in the market, and I identified other professionals that were working on this. And then somehow there's now this collision, because I realized that a lot of people were doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. That's failure to even start with. So you need to find out what the missing gap in your line of work is and align it to your work interest. So there's a gap here. Do I enjoy doing this? How can these things come together? Another thing is, stick to your lane once you've made that decision. The career role is super exciting. Like, you go on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, everybody's doing so many things and it gets so exciting. But do you know how you build success? By constantly, consistently doing the same thing. I know it sounds so boring, and there's some people who have such exciting lives and exciting jobs. But one thing that I found that works is if you decide on this is something you want to work on, own it, become so specialized in it that nobody can take it away from you, because the world is getting so competitive now, and you don't want to spend time kind of just like doing so many things, especially when you're a very young age. You hear this thing when they say people are generalists or I think it's specialist, right? being a specialist is a good thing. Being a generalist is a good thing. It just depends on what you want out of life. Like I've decided this sector is where I want to be in. I could easily be the person that wants to do oil and gas, agriculture, finance. Nah, that's distracting. And first of all, there's not enough time. So pick the lane you want to stay in and try to stick in it, stick with it. And doesn't mean you can't touch different topics. You can. But when it comes to an industry, perfect the knowledge you have in that industry. It really helps down the line, I think, anyway. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this sector. I don't know if you can see, but I've been very interested in passion in the sector for a very long time. And I enjoy the work I do, and I enjoy the work that I get to do with people as well. So keep your passion alive. Another thing I'd like to say is if you're using ChatGPT for LinkedIn posts and everything, people see through that now. So if you're demonstrating your passion online, make sure it's coming from your authentic self. The reason being that people connect with people. People don't connect with ChatGPT. So yeah. But I think I missed something else that I wanted to also speak about. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so we're almost done. Yeah, so I wanted to actually have a bit more interactive conversation here. As you can see, I've had a very exciting career in the energy space so far, one that I'm very proud of, but also one that has come with a lot of challenges. But two things have helped me kind of stay in check. The first being okay to fail. Like when I started, when I told my parents I didn't want to practice law, they were like, I don't understand, but you've literally been in law school for the last 7 years. Is everything okay? So that was one challenge. And I could have gone into the energy sector and probably not got a job, probably be struggling for a very long time. But I was prepared to fail. I had a backup option. If that didn't work, I was going to go back to law firms. And, you know, we're still pushing. That could still fail tomorrow. You don't know. Anything can happen. But then another thing I wanted to say was that you need to realize why you're actually doing this work. Like, why do you want to be in the energy sector? Why do you want a job in sustainability? Why do you want to have a career why do you want to have a career here? Like, start with why. One of my favorite books is actually the Simon Sinek book. I'm reading it for the third time. I think I have a copy right here. I'm reading it for the third time this year. I don't know, I'm doing this ad placements for him because it doesn't pay my bills, but I found the book to really, really help me. The first time I read it in 2022, changed my life. And literally now every year, it's like the first thing I read just to start the year to remind myself how I'm actually doing things to impact my own future and as well as everyone around me. So yeah, I think that was half an hour. Okay, on the spot. But yeah, please, I really want to have a discussion with all of you in the room. I've got 50 people in the room. Wow, full house. I really just want to hear from you all. Like, I'm still learning as I go. Like I said, I've literally been part of I'm just gonna go off my screen for a bit. I've literally been part of the industry for a very short time, but it's been a lot. So I would love to obviously have as much interaction as possible and probably hear from you all too. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Lawyer Osa, for your wonderful presentation. So to our audience, the floor is open for your questions. You can send your questions in the chat, or you can equally raise up your hand and then you'll be called to speak. Yes, I've learned a lot from your presentation, and I believe same goes to our audience. One key thing that I took from your presentation was the fact that when you said sustainability isn't just about carbon emissions, it goes beyond that. It's about inequality. It's also about health, education, and all that. So thank you very much for your presentation. Now, as we wait for our audience to ask, I personally have a question. Yeah. So how can the hydrogen energy help Africa to boost their economy while we are all striving towards a sustainable future? So how can the hydrogen energy sector help Africa boost its economy while Africa is driving towards a sustainable future?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So yeah, at the moment, countries like Namibia, Egypt, Angola are really pioneering, South Africa are really pioneering the conversation around hydrogen and how hydrogen can actually help support the industrialization in Africa is by identifying the needs that we have. One of the biggest needs is food security. As an entire continent, we don't produce enough food. And You won't believe it. When countries like Malaysia produce more food than half of the continent, that's really scary. And the reason being that we don't have arable land. And now that a lot of conversation goes into, okay, where is the ammonia fertilizer from this? Ammonia from hydrogen, for example, NHO can actually contribute towards that. So a lot of domestic use now that we're seeing, for example, in Namibia, is that you're producing hydrogen to be used in fertilizer production. That's one. Another is actually hydrogen fuels the need for not just renewables, but the need for increased energy in our ecosystem, right? So if you say we want to produce hydrogen for Germans or to import to Europe, we need to also improve or increase our electricity targets. So it's like a win-win. It's like if we're trying to feed into these hydrogen markets globally, we have to also introduce and increase our energy, the quality of our energy for one, right? So that's an incentive. So I'm hoping that we have more African leaders who are like, hey, want to get hydrogen? Well, that means you have to invest in electrification, because for you to get hydrogen, you have to actually either have more gas or have more renewables up in your ecosystems. Yeah.
Right, sure. Thank you very much. Also,
Just-
also
yeah.
given the global shift, given the global shift towards renewable energy and also decarbonization. I mean, as students and also young professionals, we've seen that there's this pressure for the oil and gas industry to move towards renewable energy and also decarbonization. How can young professionals and students position ourselves to still remain relevant in this changing industry? Yeah.
That's a really good question. Speaking of changing industries, I then remember that I had this exact slide here. So I'm sure a lot of people have heard the energy transition, the just energy transition, and there are a lot of roles. In fact, there are a few reports that have actually come out speaking of how Africans can prepare for the green future, right? And a lot of that involves skills moving from the oil and gas sector into the low carbon sector. So your skills are never going to disappear. What needs to happen is you need to identify where those skills are going to be placed, right? So some things like when we look into, I think this map actually said, yeah, so potential job misalignments, right? So we look into these misalignments, and what these misalignments are like, if you used to have somebody who was a dredge manager, for example, in oil and gas sector, dredging is a completely different skill of its own. And for some reason, it doesn't really exist in the renewable side of things. So what does that person have to do? So that then comes into things like the success sectorial misalignment, right? Where the sectors have changed entirely. So those skills are no longer relevant. And while it seems very scary, what that means is that that person can actually start looking for roles that are match other skills that they have that can match roles that they have. Another one is offshore wind capacity. Those kind of similar dredging skills need to exist in the offshore wind sector too. All they have to do is probably do a bit more experience, getting familiar with the technologies, and that's it, you know. But the thing is, like, these things take time, which is such a critical time for young professionals to identify where the industry is as a whole and where you're going to fit down the line. So like, don't, at this point, even as a graduate, try to think about like, okay, in 5 years, the whole world is talking about energy transition now, right? In 5 years' time, what do you think the world is going to be needing the most? Okay, and then what do I have now? How can I work backwards from that? Having those kind of conversations means that you still remain competitive even when the world is changing. It's so, so, so critical. But yeah, I hope that explanation really helped. And I think even just a lot of fears that I've had, even with students that are still studying petroleum at the rock end stage, is that these roles are not disappearing, they're just reducing. And I think that's one thing I have to emphasize. It's like your roles are not going to go away, but they're reducing. And because they're reducing, you're going to get so much more competitive. Like if you were getting 500 jobs before, they'll get to 100. So it means you as a professional have to stay ahead of the game and find other ways that you can build strengths. There's supply chain, there's risk management, there's operation and maintenance. There are other industries that are popping up that they need skills for. So you need to identify those sectors and then plug into where you think your necessary passion or interest is going to align.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answer. We have King's Victory asking a question, and he's asking that on your map signifying the hydrogen producing countries, Africa was the least active. Africa looks like the least technologically advanced. So how do we bridge the gap? That's what he's asking.
Yeah. Bridging the gap needs infrastructure. One of the biggest holdbacks in the entire continent is infrastructure. The reason why even North Africa is able to even have as much projects is because they already have infrastructure, either it being a strong energy roadmap or just having infrastructure. Infrastructure, I mean, anything from railways to electricity infrastructure to bioplants to buildings to houses. That's one thing we lack in this region. See the West, see how empty this region is as a whole. It breaks my heart because like the amount of activities that happens in the North and South region of Africa doesn't match what's happening there. And when there's no infrastructure, economic growth doesn't really happen. So building that gap means that even just getting from Lagos to Accra is a nightmare because we can't go by road. There isn't a train that just lets me go from one city to another. But in South Africa, in the northern African parts, it's almost easier because there's road from Namibia all the way to Botswana. So infrastructure is a big part. And I think that's what we need to actually fill that gap to help not just the continent, but for new energies to actually happen. But that doesn't mean things are not happening. It's just not happening at the speed at which other countries are having access to these. I hope that answered the question.
Right. King's Victory, I hope that answers your question. If not, you can come again. But then before that, we have Asia asking a question that can you be a generalist in sustainability, or you need to be a specialist in a particular field like energy? That's Asia's question.
Thank Asia. And you can be a sustainability specialist, of course. There are people who work at Google, Microsoft, the oil and gas space. Sustainability officers are now becoming a role. In fact, there was a report that actually said there's been a growth in the amount of chief sustainability officers role that has happened. So these are people that like will support companies, their company that they work for in-house, to identify sustainability risks across the entire value chain. So you see what I've done for energy? Somebody's doing that for fast-moving consumer goods like Unilever, or somebody's even doing that in UBA, United Bank of Africa. People are doing sustainability metrics, either through the ESR aspect of things or SDG aspect of things. So you can be a specialist. Like I'm more specialized in sustainability in the energy sector. Reason being, these are two things that are tying together, and this is just like my own niche, right? You have people also who are sustainability experts in water, for example. So I think it just depends on like where you call your strengths. For example, nobody's calling me for an aggregation project down in a farm in Accra because that's not my specialty. Like I'm not going to be out in a farm in Accra, but I'm going out to projects on hydrogen because like that's kind of my specialty. So I guess it's just what works for you. I'm not one to be like, oh, be a generalist or be a specialist, because the world is moving so fast right now. You have to decide what you want to do, almost sharp.
Right, great.
That's all.
Thank you very much, Lawyer Osa. And so before I ask the next question to our audience, a link has been sent into the chat. Please do well to fill the form and let us know how we can make this session better. And so on to the next question. King's Victory asked, with the educational system, let me reframe that again. King's Victory is saying the educational system does not fit in Africa. The educational system in Africa does not fit this transition to hydrogen. And so how can that gap be bridged as well? I mean, with the gap with our educational system, and also if we would want to switch to hydrogen, how can we bridge that gap and then proceed with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In fact, I feel it's about time we look for a fund that's going to support introducing new energy technologies into our educational system. And yeah, like it's, you know, there's a massive gap because it's like we're training people with the same curriculums that we had 20 years ago for a future that's happening now. And I think that's even a concern. And I'm really open to this year, like working with universities to kind of like shape curriculums that help project the future, because there's no point learning about things that are not going to be relevant to you when graduating in 5 years' time. So yeah, it's a shift that's happening in Europe. Some European universities are now taking it up to themselves to actually introduce new technologies in their curriculums. But it hasn't happened in Africa because I guess somebody has to fund that change. You know, either schools are going to have to recognize that it's a gap and want to change it, or you know, maybe students can actually speak to their faculties and see how they can incite those change. And again, even for the fresh graduates, this is an opportunity for you to introduce yourself as scholars, you know. I've written a few books in the industry that I feel will hopefully be of value to not just practitioners, but also students. But I think even graduates start looking at yourself as being a lecturer or a faculty member, you know, just filling in that gap, because at the end of the day, change is going to start with us, right? So we have to be open to driving this really big, challenging conversations. Hey, how are we going to change our curriculum to make sure it matches the demand for the future today?
Thank you very much. Edward is asking that where do you see energy advocacy in the coming years, knowing that you did law and you love energy. So where do you see energy advocacy in the coming years? Yeah,
That's a good question. So I work as a energy policy. So I work energy policy as a lawyer. So I work in energy policy. And what that means is I get to engage with a lot of governments as well as the private sector to help understand, first of all, their needs, and then their needs for development. And the advocacy part of things, I feel, has been a challenge on the public sector side of things, right? So I met with some stakeholders from Ghana at the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, right? And one of the things that I got as a feedback was that, so I know you just had a new government, congratulations. One of the things I had as feedback was, hey, we have a new government, so it has to take time for the government to sit in, for him to get his ministers in check and all of that. So even moments like that, it's an opportunity for us to create awareness with new governments so they can prioritize energy or climate or sustainability endeavors as part of their benchmarks, right? And I think even one thing that I would appreciate getting to our ecosystem as Africans is to start training embedded or incoming governments around energy advocacy. So they're not coming in thinking they need to start from the beginning. No, people need to come in and realize we already have these things on ground. How can we speed them up a little bit faster? So I think that advocacy in the private sector, on the public sector side, a lot of indigenous oil and gas companies do really, really well with trying to stay abreast with like compliance issues, which is very good to know. But I think on the other hand, advocacy is something that a lot of international development agendas have been funding. I think there's a need to have domesticated advocacy efforts. They call them civil social organizations out here, and I think it's kind of the same thing all around the world. So CSOs are civil social organizations that really are opting for the public good, right? So I guess a lot of those need to now be funded, you know, in order to make sure advocacy doesn't fade away because of a change of government, for example.
right. Thank you very much. Jude is asking if we could connect with you and also get access to your books and articles. And I'm also asking that on behalf of our audience. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So I have a blog called the Carbon Body Substack. My LinkedIn is my name. On Instagram, I have a WhatsApp channel where I share job opportunities in Africa. It's just Carbon Body Network. And I think most of my books, I think just one of them are free, sadly. The one on touching hydrogen futures. I will see if I can put that in the chat right now. But then the others are sadly on their paywalls. But I think the Touching Hydrogen Future will be a good one. I actually don't know if we don't cover Ghana yet. So a few countries have been covered. But if you're interested in actually covering Ghana, I'm not sure if a new edition is going to be coming out soon, but it's definitely something to consider because a lot of African countries are trying to find, oh no, sorry, I'm just gonna share this one instead. A lot of African countries are trying to identify their own roles in the just transition. So it'd be good to like see if anyone's interested in that, to just start talking about what Ghana is going to do regarding the hydrogen economy for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, lawyer, please, talking about roles, countries' roles in this energy transition, what are some of the challenges that the Africa energy sector is likely to face in an attempt to join this energy transition?
Oh, I think it's us, like talent. I think it's talent. So one of the big gaps that we're having, people say things like how Africa is going to, surpass India with population. Africa is going to meet, this particular population by 2050, all these things. But then it's like, I feel there's a massive gap in job creation and talent acquisition across the continent. And I feel that gap is something that is going to meet us in front, because primarily there isn't more effort into training experienced people in the sector. I mean, there are a lot of courses, there are a lot of enabling work that happens, but definitely something we need to do a lot more of. I think the reason being, even as a young person, it's hard enough navigating your career anywhere in the world. But then being a young person in Africa, and this is something I experienced as well, being a young person in Africa means that you're having to also navigate your career in a continent that isn't even preparing for the future in a way. So it gets very scary. And I feel it's one thing that I want to be honest about, but one thing that I also would like to say that because there's so many options at this point, unlike if you were like in Germany, for example, where your career is kind of like this, because there's so many options at this point, you literally have so many things that you could be doing. And then obviously all of a sudden, like, I don't feel too scared because I'm like, you can study drilling operations, but then get into data because you understand the way like systems work, right? Like just so many opportunities for you to actually delve into. And I think it's also just a thing of you making sure that you're not only working for your now, but working for your future. So if you're taking a course, if you're signing up to like a new course on Coursera or Udemy, like, why are you doing that course? Are you doing it because you want to do on LinkedIn? I've successfully done a course, or are you doing a course because you feel this is actually going to get you a job in the future? Like, what is the purpose? What is your why? Yeah, exactly. Start with your why.
Right. Thank you very much, Loyan. And there's this question that is on my heart, which is right now, the Africa energy sector is a necessity for economic growth, yet it faces global pressure to move towards sustainability. And so how can African countries combine the need for growth with also the sustainability goals to end up creating an economy that would benefit its people and also at the same time meet the sustainability goals in the Paris Agreement?
That's a really good question. So the NDCs, which are the National Determined Contribution, they're due this in February. And what the NDCs are is that the Paris Agreement introduced the NDCs as a way to help countries actually track their climate strategies or climate ambitions, right? And it's every 5 years. So I think the next one after this year is 2030. Continents like Africa are in a very peculiar state. The reason being that, I don't know, more than 600 million Africans are not electrified, yet we have some of the biggest hubs for gas. Right? I think Nigeria on its own is like has the ninth largest reserve for gas. Like, there's such a big disconnect, right? It goes back to the infrastructure. The priorities for Africa are going to be different from the priorities from the UK or wherever. For example, we have really good climate here. We don't need, in the December months, we don't need heating. That's already one thing that we're saving energy on. So for the life of me, I still don't understand why. I mean, I know, but I don't understand why a lot of like the continent isn't electrified. Now, to your question of, being a continent and actually trying to meet the energy transition, is that I'm of the opinion that a lot of African countries need to do what's best for them and their people, as long as they're being sustainable and meeting low carbon criteria. Like, if you can provide energy with gas, do that, but you don't have to burn or keep gas flaring on, because you can actually stop gas flaring and still provide electricity for your citizens. I think it's just being more cautious about the kind of decisions as a continent or individual countries that we want to take. And I think also paying attention to the needs. So the needs of electricity in Nigeria is completely different to the needs of electricity in Sierra Leone, for example, right? We all have different national goals. And then one other thing we do at the Elders Council, looking into energy storage, is we try and make sure countries identify their energy planning and assess their energy needs. So for you to actually deliver on energy, you need to know how much energy you actually need. So Ghana is a big or small country, but at the same time, what they need for energy is not the same thing Nigeria probably needs for energy. So if the government or the country sits down and say, in the next 40 years, this is we want to get to. Okay, to get there, how much energy do we need? Do we need 2 terawatts? And how much emissions are we, how many grid aggregator plants are we building? What's our transition like capacity? So we need to start having the conversation around the needs assessment. You know, people are saying Africa is going to be the next big continent. Yeah, okay, great. But how much energy are we going to need? We don't know that. Nobody can tell me how much energy we need in the specific country. I spoke to someone from Sierra Leone the other week, and they're actually doing an energy planning matrix. Kenya did one a few years ago. So these countries are now identifying their energy needs. And when you know where you want to get to, you can start working backwards from there. And it's a sign of success, if you ask me. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much, Lawyer
Thank
Osa,
you.
for your response. To the audience, Lawyer has sent the link to her book, so you can have access to it via the link. Right. Thank you so much for participating in the question and answer session. And so I would like to thank Lawyer Osa as well for her presentation and also for taking the time to answer our questions. Lawyer, thank you very much. All right.
Thank you so much for having me. All right. Take care, everyone.
Right. So, and please, a link has been sent into the chat. Please do well to fill the form and let us know how we can make future sessions better. Right. Our next session is digital transformation in the oil and gas industry. And so please anticipate and then look forward to that. Right. I would like to invite Miss Aunt Ekuba Mensah to give us the vote of thanks. So Miss Aunt Ekuba, if you're here with us, over to you. All right. So as we are waiting for her, I would like to remind you of the link that is being posted in the chat. It's a Google form. Please do well to fill the form. It will take less than a minute of your time. And then let us know how we can make future sessions better. Yes, I've seen that Lawyer Wusa has added another link to one of her publications. Right. So I'll move on to invite Miss Auntie Kuba Mensah to give us the vote of thanks. Let me. Please, if you're here with us, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, Ima.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, on behalf of the Career Guidance Subcommittee, we would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to everyone on this webinar. That's Understanding Energy Sustainability. To share expertise and insights with us, and her presentations were informative, engaging, and provided valuable strategies. Hello, Ima, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, but you were not quite clear before this.
Sorry, echo came through. So
Hello.
hello.
Yes, you can be heard now.
Okay. So to our organizers and technical team, we are grateful for your tireless efforts in ensuring the smooth execution of this webinar. And then also to the Ghana section, we say thank you. And to our section chair, Engineer Derek, we say thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all once again for your contribution, and we look forward to engaging you in our next webinar. Thank you. Bye.
Right. Thank you so much, Ms. Ansi Kuba-Mensah, for your vote of thanks. To our audience, once again, thank you very much for participating in this session. See you in our next webinar. Bye.
Bye. Bye.